welcome to Let's Talk to Animals. My name is Shannon Cutts. I'm an animal intuitive and sensitive, most importantly, a cockatiel mama for those of you watching the video version over on YouTube, and delighted to be your friendly neighborhood host for this interspecies communication podcast where we demystify, de-woo, if you will, all things two-way interspecies communication. What is it? How does it work? Who can do it? Is there ever a moment in life when you're too old to learn? And I am living proof that the answer to that is absolutely not. Are your animals trying to talk to you? Yes, but don't take my word for it. We've got 4 seasons worth of wonderful episodes with intuitives and practitioners all over the world. And today, right at the tippy top of that list, we have finally gotten a chance to interview Joan Ranquet from Communication with All Life University. I couldn't be more honored. I adore your books, though I'm actually rereading the one right above your head if you're watching the video, The Revelations of an Animal Communicator, and it's absolutely fascinating and packed full of stories. So we're going to go for the Cliff Notes version. Oh my gosh, did I just date myself? Cliff Notes version of Joan's story today. Joan, welcome. Thank you so much for making time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
I'm absolutely delighted that you're here. So I prepped you a little bit before we hit record that we always invite our guests here, no matter how many years, decades, how steeped you are in the world of interspecies communication and mutual learning and growth, to rewind us, take us back to the beginning. What was it like for you when you were just first discovering that this was even a thing and maybe making those first tentative and very brave steps towards incorporating it into your life?
Well, my first experience with it was being the client, right? So I was talk about dating yourself. It was the 80s, late 80s. Had a horse that I loved. She was really my first notice that you could have an animal soulmate. And she was very much a spiritual teacher for me in that I had my sister die, and I was really a big seeker back then, and really, soaking up loss and death and learning about, grieving and mindfulness. I really got into mindfulness. And I remember, so when I say she's my spiritual teacher, it wasn't like she was some wise horse. What would happen is if I was not mindful with her, she'd buck. So
nice.
It became very clear that my thoughts were going toward my life. Other than that, she really taught me about being mindful and in the moment. So when I had the animal communicator come talk to her, to me, the most incredible thing on the planet was, number one, just how deep that connection really was, and how, here's somebody affirming that and yet confirming for me that a lot of what I was feeling, sensing, experiencing was real. So that was the most important thing for me, was that this relationship was kind of highly valued by the horse and myself, and that someone else was witnessing and experiencing that as well. So for her to be able to say the things that she was saying was just amazing. And also, how did she know that? And so all of those things that we love, that are exciting, went through my head. But at the time, I was in the theater and film world, and so I didn't think I could do it, right? I thought all the things that everybody else thinks that, oh, that's a gift she has. And it turns out that it was a skill set. And once I learned the skill set and I looked back, I realized, I wouldn't say that I came into the world talking to animals, but I was always deeply connected. And that connection was once created into a deeper skill was always there. I mean, if that makes sense. So it was always there, but
It does.
wasn't, but it was. So, and I think that's kind of, everybody that's connected and wants to do this at some point. They may not have thought they talked to animals when they were little, like some people say they do, and that's great. But mine was more of a connection and a love, right?
And that desire, I just hear just shot through your story, that desire to be present for your soul animal and to be responsive and very aware of the two-way dynamic. It feels like there's a schism, if you will, in our ability to stay connected with animals in the way in which our predecessors have always quite naturally been. Before we invented the automobile, if we wanted to get anywhere in life or get anything done, we needed our animals.
Right. Civilization was built with horses and ox and cow, and other farm animals, but largely the horse has been,
Mm-hmm.
could plow the field and take us to church, so it was necessary.
It was necessary. Now it feels like we struggle to find a place for the animals that our souls and even our biology still craves. Like life doesn't feel right without an animal for most of us. And yet finding a way to fit that animal into life that no longer seems to really need them.
No, because we live on these.
Yeah, these are
If
our new
we're doing
pets.
this, we're
Yeah.
doing this.
I know. You see how easy it was for both of us to find ours. It's
Oh yeah,
right
right here.
there.
My,
Totally.
uh,
Totally. It feels like there's so much of a wake up call because maybe we get on social media and we see these adorable pictures of these cute animals, whether it's a horse with I have a friend and a fellow animal intuitive who has one of those horses. It's kind of on the cover, like a cover model horse with the braided mane and the beautiful designs and everything. And it's like, and that works. And so we think, oh, I'll go get a horse. That looks like a lot of fun. And then we get things like bucking and spooking, and then there are
broken
health
collarbone.
issues. And
Yeah.
yeah, oh my goodness, yeah, it suddenly gets a little bit more or a lot more real, and we realize how our lives just don't naturally accommodate this equality that I still feel like we crave. So we try to fit our animals into our world. We put costumes on them, which is fine for fun for a day if the animal doesn't mind, but to just recognize, and I've got this on my mind because right before you and I got on Zoom, I was speaking with one of my human clients who was just really struggling with how her dog was behaving versus who the dog says she is. And we have to navigate this in the middle of a life that really doesn't allow this animal to accompany us in all of the normal ways. I read accounts of how in the winter farmers would bring all of their animals inside and they shared
Yeah.
body heat to keep warm.
Yeah. Maybe not in Houston, but
No, we don't need that. We just need maybe we bring the reptiles inside to stay cool. I don't know.
yeah.
But so it's
No.
interesting. It feels like a real call for anyone who's listening to a podcast called Let's Talk to Animals versus all the other options out there. We're going to maybe assume that if you're listening to this, you're watching this, that you do feel intuitively like your animal is trying to talk to you, but you're not really sure where to take that. And that's a question that we certainly aspire to help you answer as our listener, as our viewer. And I'm going to take the expertise of today's guest to ask Joan, what would you say if somebody's listening to this and they're like, yeah, I feel like my animal's trying to talk to me, but we have such A to Z left brain minds that we're like, well, if I'm not going to be a professional, I shouldn't even start the journey. What would you say to someone like that? How would you recommend that they proceed? Because there is an interest, right? And there is a desire to receive their animal's messages.
Well, I think that, I mean, almost everybody on the planet either wants to talk to animals, breathe underwater, or fly, right? I mean, and maybe all of the above.
That all sounds good to me.
Yeah, there's Penelope.
Well,
She wants
hey there.
a conversation.
Hi,
But she's
darling.
here to monitor what the cat activity in the house is, and
Oh,
can she
okay.
everybody. But I mean, she is here. We can be honored to have her here, but just so you know, she
Yeah, I
may,
can tell that the attention is really heading. Yeah.
yeah.
Supervising her
Um,
staff.
there's one cat there and there's another
Okay.
cat. Yeah, around the corner. Anyway,
Yeah.
we're full of animals in this house.
Love it.
But what I really believe that everybody is an animal communicator, and then it's just a matter of how much are you believing, trusting what you're getting. So I think there's lots of different ways for people to sit and listen to their own animals, and it's only going to help the planet. You don't have to become a professional if we were all listening to each other, right? I mean, that's, I think, one of our biggest problems on the planet is the amount of thoughts that take up space, where then the other ways of thinking or doing something don't get any airplay because they aren't valued. But if we all took time to value the animals in our home, we'd have a different world. We'd have to start taking care of the planet in a different way, and we'd have to start taking care of each other in a different way. But I really think that it starts with animals. So even if it isn't something that you want to do professionally, it's always going to be worth your time to learn how to listen.
It feels like a challenge out there for any pet parent, any animal carer, any rescue worker, any guardian to take up what you just said and start to resonate with it. Take it into your field of perception about who you are and say, well, maybe I am already an animal communicator. Maybe we really are more alike than different. There's this scientific issue that keeps cropping up, and it doesn't seem as present today as it was when I first started getting more animal literate, if you will. But oh well, I'm just imagining things, or even worse, I'm anthropomorphizing. For those of you who are listening and you're not sure how to spell that or what that means, it basically means assigning human-like qualities to non-human beings or things.
But more and more, as we give animals agency, it's anthropocentric. It's very much all about me. If I don't start to recognize them as almost like human, I mean, I am very much, to be clear, species specific, right? Like why a dog is doing something is going to be different than why a human is doing it. But and our emotions are not going to be exactly the same, yet they run as deep. But for us to not understand who they are and to not give them agency is completely anthropocentric. And we're not anthropomorphizing if we're giving us, recognizing their feelings and their experience and legitimizing the whole experience of us living together.
I'm fascinated by the genomic studies that are done, and they attempt to prove or disprove how much DNA we share. And I think, well, if we share any at all, then there's some common ground. It's just awfully hard to look around and say, well, we're all kind of made of the same stuff. We're all living here on the same place. So even if it's a passing phase, we've all got some level of soul contract to be here together. We've got something we can learn from one another.
Even with flies.
Even with flies. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness. Speaking of
flying. That was
anyone who's ever wanted to see me with my special one of a kind customized cockatiel hat will want to head over to YouTube right now because it's happening live. Your communication with All Life University, you span the gamut from rank beginners all the way to folks that maybe have been studying with you through the highest and most advanced levels. So let's just pretend I'm on day one. Where would you send me? Because you've got a lot going on.
I got a lot going on.
You do have
Uh,
a lot going on.
yeah, it's a whole thing. So you can either come and learn animal communication with a digital class, or you can come and have a live experience where there's 12 weeks of live calls. And we run those classes 3 times a year. Those are called Animal Communication Level 1. And then we have a similar track for energy healing where you could do digital classes. And like I have a new book coming out, Emotional Freedom Technique for Animals.
Fantastic.
This will be
That's
out in a few
beautiful.
weeks. Yeah. So you learn EFT, or you learn scalar waves. So we have the beginning track of digital or live. And then with the animal communication, the next level would be going into animal medical intuition. And then the next level from there is going into advanced animal communication, behavior, relationships, and dynamics. And what I find, like, for example, what you had just said is if an animal, if the dog or cat is saying, I'm this is who I am, yet the behavior is somewhere down the road, either they've had a rough experience that could be helped through EFT,
EFT.
or you could be discovering that perhaps there's a physical issue. And so I don't like people to go into behavior class until they've done the animal medical intuition, because often there's a very significant reason, either from an experience they had or from something that's going on physically in their body. And animals are masters at hiding pain. That's one of their biggest survival mechanisms. So that's why the progression is like that. And then for our more advanced studies, we have animal communication in rescues and shelters, in sanctuaries, in zoo and wildlife centers, and then in a professional setting. So like this last round of that level 4 class, they had a dog that was in the movie Dog. They had a whole bunch of
Oh,
animals.
how fantastic. Well, you've got this
Therapy.
theater and the acting and that whole world of creatives to draw from too. So it must be fantastic.
Yeah, that seems like that seems like another lifetime ago.
Oh,
But I do still have friends, and I can come up with the emu from the Liberty commercials, or you know what I mean. Like I do know a few famous animals anyway,
mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm.
so that's where it goes. And I've got a lot of people that are out being professional animal communicators now, and a lot of people come back and teach for the school. And then we have a similar track for the energy healing. And ultimately, with the energy healing, specifically the EFT, emotional freedom technique, we know how much it changes behaviors. And we have a whole pilot program where we're going to be taking that into shelters to work with the unadoptable animals. And
Oh,
I'm
fantastic.
starting that project with a humane society in Michigan this summer.
Oh, that's phenomenal. So I want to back up for just a minute. One of the things that we strive to at least assist with here on the podcast is helping students find where their heart is really singing towards. So can you speak to that a little bit about what is the difference between animal communication versus, let's say, energy healing or medical intuition? Where would you even start?
Yeah, I think the gateway is always animal communication,
Okay.
because, like you said, I wouldn't go to the medical intuition. I'll give you a little example.
Okay.
There, I was working with a horse, and the woman, I knew that this horse was such a pleaser, and she wanted to do the right thing, and she loved her work. And all of the things about this horse would indicate that she was going to be perfect to ride, yet she was bucking her person off. And when I looked at that fact, that this is not in the personality, then I have to go to the medical intuition. And then what I discovered was the saddle didn't fit because the left shoulder was higher than the right shoulder, because there was an old injury that happened in the right hind leg, and on and on and on, that built up this problem where the back would just seize almost, and she would explode, and she wouldn't mean to. So when we look at animal behavior, a lot of it is based in either a compensation, a recovering from an old injury, or a recent injury that starts to, chronic pain can change a human personality. So all of these things can add up to, for example, one of the biggest ways that we see that there's probably been something that's happened is through leash reactivity. So first, find out who they are, and they really want to be this happy-go-lucky animal, yet they get out in the street and they have to act this way. There's definitely something going on. And either it's been an experience that they've had where they've been attacked, or they have some sort of a head injury, maybe an eye thing, maybe a neck thing, and they're reactive. So that's the sort of thing where I think animal communication is number one.
Mm.
Now, a lot of people I find they want to fix things. And I always say that as an animal communicator or an energy healer, you're not a fixer. We can, so learning these other modalities are a way to allow healing to happen if you want to have a backup for your client. So let's say you have a client whose dog is reactive. You discover that something happened in its past because it shares the story. You start to unwind that. Now, being heard, and that's again why animal communication to me is the gateway. And to listen to someone and for them to share a story for the first time can be the most healing thing on the planet. But let's say there's a little more trauma involved and the dog is reactive. So the dog shares the story being attacked, but it's still in the dog to be reactive on the street. So then you have something like an EFT, emotional freedom technique, where you start to unwind that in the animal's nervous system. You take that story out. They're not going to forget that story, but they're not going to be triggered. And you do the same thing with the human, right? Like you start to unwind all the frustrating feelings a person would have when the dog reacts, and the sadness, and the, oh, I'm a bad dog parent, all of the things that the person's going to feel. When you start to unwind that for the person and the other things for the dog, now you have two beings doing able to do something different. So I always say that the animal communication is a very powerful healing technique to begin with, because
Oh,
listening to
I
someone,
love that.
best thing on the planet. But
Mm.
having some of these energy healing techniques are profound. I mean, another example would be, let's say, kidney disease. The other technique that I teach, scalar wave, sometimes we can change the blood work. I mean, not sometimes. More often than not, we can help the client with their animal, maybe give them a few extra months, years, whatever it is. So the two techniques that I teach, one addresses more behavior and one addresses illnesses and health challenges. So the listening is profound. And often you don't need these other tools, but having the extra tools is amazing.
Yeah, if you're listening or you're watching this right now and think about a time when you've just felt really deeply heard and how incredible that is. And frankly, sometimes how rare. And then imagine that it's happened for the first time. And for many, many animals, it feels like it is the first time that they've
But
ever
yeah,
imagined sharing space with your animal. You just drop everything, every preconceived notion, every anthropocentric or anthropomorphizing instinct or tendency in you, and just say, tell me about yourself. What's going on with you? And but I also love how you share the complementary relationship. And I feel like that's something that can get really confusing to beginners. I know when I first said yes and walked through the doors of my very first animal communication course, I didn't know how big and how much was involved. My mindset was like, I'm just going to learn animal communication 101. And then I started learning about medical intuition and energy healing and all these different facets. And I feel like if you sit and just sink into your heart and just see kind of what calls to your spirit, and then you decide kind of where you want to be along that pipeline, because each one has a different role. And I love how you just explained that. It's like if the conversation, and I really want you to get this if you're listening or you're watching, if the conversation doesn't do the trick, so to speak, like you said, it's tremendously healing, then maybe it's time to look at, well, is there discomfort in the body? Do we need to work with medical intuition, or is there another technique like EFT or scalar wave that we can use that may address the issue? But to start with gathering the information. I think that's really beautiful how
and
you
then
did
for
that.
the people that are drawn to energy healing, at least learning animal communication, even if it
Mhm.
isn't what you're going to do, becomes so important. And learning medical intuition and animal medical intuition is very different than medical intuition, because we're talking about animals that are walking on four legs. So everything is different. I mean, it's the same on the one hand. It's very fun to do animal medical intuition with primates because it's very much the same. But doing it here with our dogs and cats and horses, or your birds, who a bird is
Mhm.
bipedal, but it's still
Mhm.
the
They
wing.
have wings. Mine's just starting to figure out what these cool, crazy things are on either side of her body. And sometimes she just walks around with them. She's like, look, look. Like it's so cool.
Yeah. If you want to do energy healing on animals at some point, you're going to accidentally be talking to animals. So you might as well go learn it.
Hmm.
And having animal medical intuition is just going to speed the process up 100 times.
So just consider kind of where you want to be in the pipeline. And I think feeling reassured, listening to you, feeling reassured that you can just start somewhere, just start.
Yeah.
And
I,
then for me, it has felt like if you just say yes to something, more will be revealed.
yeah,
Does that
absolutely.
resonate with you?
Yeah, start somewhere. And one thing that like I love about my school is we have,
One of many things, I'm sure.
yeah, but I love
Yeah.
all the teachers are very, I mean, I have 25 teachers at this point, and they're very well trained to help somebody build confidence through the verification process. So you need to be somewhere where information is being verified in a structured environment, because if it's some sort of like chat group and
Yeah,
oh,
that's a good
maybe
point.
you could end up with habits that you have to undo, and maybe always question yourself. I mean, I think that everybody should is at some point there's a confidence and yet a humility all at the same time. So when you said
Oh,
that you still
beautifully
question,
said.
I still, there are times when I'm like, oh my God, but then I just am like, yeah, of course, let's just jump in. We're here. So you have to, yeah, you need a structured environment for sure, especially once you
Yeah.
start dealing with animal medical intuition.
Well, and just the support and the guidance and the mentoring. Mentoring has
Hmm.
always been huge in my life. I've always had very caring, gifted mentors, and I strive to be one myself in whatever way I'm called to do so. But it's just, it can feel like a lonely journey. If
Absolutely.
we're talking about a journey of connection, of learning to connect, especially learning to connect across species boundaries, we've got to start by breaking down the isolation that we feel and being willing to connect. And that's something, maybe that's a great kind of a final topic before we talk about how to connect and how to reach out and where to start and all those good things. But there's this one final little component that may be worth chatting about. There's this idea, I guess, when we say yes to our very first animal communication, that we're going to be working with animals, we're going to be learning to talk to animals. And we forget that in many cases, if not most cases, if not all cases, there's another human attached to that animal. Essentially, we're going to be working
Oh
as
yeah.
this animal's advocate, but we're working with this human as well. And that can change the dynamic. It can stall out the verification process. It can bring up questions. It can be a challenge.
Well, and that's why my program in particular is
Mm-hmm.
as long as it is, because
Yeah.
people then are super confident, even if the person on the other side of the phone or the Zoom is saying, oh, that's not my dog. My
Yeah.
students have ways of that. Like I said, there's humility and confidence, and it's a fine line. But I would say that if you don't like people, it's not a job for you,
Hmm.
because you've got to communicate with the person in order to communicate with the animal. Now, granted, most of us like animals a little more than we like people,
Not gonna
but
lie.
that said, yeah, but I also love people and I respect people, and I know that the only way that we're going to help animals is if we're able to communicate and not put people on the defense, right?
Yeah.
So that we
Yeah.
communicate with a humility and a respect and a reverence for what they know and their experience and who they are as people that are seeking help.
Are seeking, I mean, it's kind of a big deal for somebody that's actually willing to make that first move and say, I need help. I want some outside input, or there's something here that I
Yeah, it's a huge.
sense. It's a huge deal. I remember my very first class, and this podcast brings back those memories a lot. And when the teacher introduced tuning in with the other human, and I was like, oh no, none of that for me. Thank you. And my practice partner had to literally talk me into it. It was just daunting. It was like I felt like I was tackling enough learning to interact with the animal. And so, again, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this and you're feeling like this is all very new to you, awesome.
Hmm.
Let it be new. Let it be exciting. Just say yes to the very first thing in front of you and then let the path unfold. Just visualize a red carpet unfolding in front of you and leading you from one thing to the next to the next. So, Joan, if one thing leads to the next and they want to reach out to you and get started, just tell us, it sounds like you've got a new book coming out next week, which I'm super excited about. And how can they just connect with you, get started, plug in, choose a teacher? How does that all work?
So they can go to my website, www.joanranquet.com. And that's JOANRANQUET.com.
QUET. Thank you.
And we have there's schools. I take people on wildlife trips, and all the services are there.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the books.
And the books. And the books. So joanranquet.com. Of course, I'll put that in the show notes. Very excited for your new book next week. About time we have a book all about EFT specifically for animals. I'm a huge fan as well. First and foremost for myself, but definitely for my animals as well. And so lots more learning to come. I, again, just appreciate the donation of your time to be a part of our show and share your many, many decades of expertise and the love that you have for animals with those of us who are walking in your footsteps. So very grateful. Thank you so very much. And I look forward to sharing your work with our community very soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and Penelope.
I know you and your family. And for those of you who are listening and watching, especially those of you who may have found us for the first time, this season, season 4, we are sharing new episodes every 2 weeks. You can find us over on your favorite streaming platform or over on YouTube at the extremely unsexy SM Cutts. That's my handle, or I think you can find it at Shannon Cutts too. And then you look under the new podcast tab, or animallovelanguages.com/podcast will get you there as well. So again, all of our love to you and your interspecies families. And please do join us back in 2 weeks for a fresh new episode of Let's Talk to Animals. Okay, bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.